Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of On My Studio Table. If you wonder if I'm looking like I've been caught in the rain, it's just that my hair hasn't dried after I washed it. It's been very wet weather and it takes a long time to dry as it's quite fine. So this is my wet look, I guess you could call it. I'm in my studio again, of course, at home. Last time I was in the studio and gallery, which was the shop front of my business, and if you saw the last video you would know that I've now closed that shop front, which I have had in a couple of different places within the same town for over 20 years. So I'm enjoying being at home, I'm still running my business, and I'm building on different aspects of it also, which you can check in the last video if you want to know more about it. As usual, I have an artwork hanging behind me, and this is one that's called The Random Years. We were house sitting in a little cabin in a rainforest at the time that I did the fabrics for this. So I did some rusting out on the picnic table, and the fabric at the top, which looks a bit like a collar, was done with that. And I just laid it there for about 72 hours, I think, until the rust prints appeared onto the fabric. The rainforest plant didn't do a lot to do with colour or printing on the fabric, but it did give me some interesting shades of grey in the background, which I really liked, and it is offset really well by the rust prints. Below the collar section is a selection of panels made from art paper and tea bag paper. So I've bound the edges with tea bag paper. And the papers are very indistinct eco prints, and I put them away because I was a bit disappointed I mustn't have weighted them down enough or tied them up tightly or whatever it was that I did. But when I started this piece, I thought they were ideal. It's based on a book which was a bestseller in the 1950s. I didn't know about it until probably about 15 years ago, and it was called Random Harvest. A really interesting and well-written story about a man who had amnesia for many years and how he came out of it. So his memories were very indistinct or blurry. So I thought these blurry eco prints really reflected that. And he had a persona that didn't feel like him because it wasn't complete. He was successful in his life, but he just didn't feel complete. So that's what this piece is about, and the little glimpses of memories that he had, which he couldn't make sense of, and he tried to for most of his adult life. Hanging on the top is a little book that I made using rusted paper, which I shellacked, and inside is a bit of a description of the piece and what it was based on. I've also penciled some quotes from the book onto the papers. And if you would like to see close-up pictures of this, you will see in my art and decor section in my website called gonerustic.com, which you would know if you've been following me. You can go there and you can see some close-ups. I hope to do some more close-ups because I didn't do very many at the time that I listed it. So I'm going to also show you a few things that are on my studio table, of course, which I do every time I film this. And I would like to do this a little bit more often. It's been a very busy time packing up the shop front, bringing it all home, finding places for everything. And I did actually sell off the chairs that I used there, so that's one thing I didn't have to think about. And it's really nicely set up again, and I'll show you that at some point. My studio, of course, is my inner sanctum, and that's where I do most of my work. So one of the things that I promised I would show you was my almost finished table runner made out of hexagons, and this was done in a quilt as you go method, Japanese inspired, and I used my naturally dyed fabrics. It's almost all joined together now, but I've left a little bit undone so I could show you how it all comes together. Unfortunately, I can't really show you the whole table runner. It's a bit difficult because it's quite big. So I hope you can get a bit of an idea. I'll share some full-size photos on my Instagram and Facebook accounts. But as you can see, most of it is joined together. It needs a good press just to make it sit flat, which I'll probably do from the back because I don't want to squash the embroidery. The embroidery is hand done to my own design. So here I have a little gap that I haven't joined. And what you do, I'll just undo my needle. What you do is you actually do it with the right sides together, as in most cases when you're stitching. And you have to fold the previous hexagon kind of in half to get it out of the way. And then you have your edge that you need to do. And what I try to do is to match up the corners as well as I can, and then do a couple of extra stitches from each side, just as tiny as possible. And I'm hoping that I can do this because I usually hold this right up to my face because I'm short-sighted. So a couple of extra little stitches just to make sure that the corners match. And then with the next hexagon where it's matching the opposite side, I do the same thing right on the corner. Very tiny stitches. I think you call this an overcast stitch. And once you've done that, then you just keep going. And you just pull it fairly tightly, not too tightly. You just go across and you just catch, I don't know if you can see that, you just catch the top of the two edges with your needle. I also use quite a fine needle. It makes less holes, smaller holes I should say, in the fabric, but also it encourages you to stitch finer stitches, I found. So you just keep doing that until you get to the end. And then once you get to the end of that seam, then you bend this around, and then this hexagon has to be kind of folded in half to get it out of the way. So I'll just show you that again. I'll park my needle. I have folded the previous hexagon in half so I can stitch these two edges together. And you can actually put a pin here too if you want to make sure that they match, and then take it out just before you get to it. And then once you've done that seam, you take this one around, maybe put a pin at the end as well, and keep going, doing your extra little stitches where it matches up on the corners like I showed you, and then keeping going. And that will be my last little bit, and it will be finished. So it's been a lengthy project, but I have really enjoyed it. So I'll just put that aside. The next thing that I'd like to show you is a sketchbook. Now this sketchbook I did as part of a class with Cas Holmes, and I will put a link to her page underneath this video. And we were encouraged to do a sketchbook, and I love to draw, but I haven't really been very faithful about keeping a sketchbook. So this was a good exercise for me. And for the covers I used some collaged papers that I'd partially painted with paint I made from the earth. And that's also a class that I offer, which I'll activate again later this year. It's called Grounded, and you use the earth around you to make paints using natural ingredients. So I did that on some paper, then I collaged some pieces on, including the title cover of a home journal, a vintage one from 1951, which is almost as vintage as me, and other papers such as dictionary papers, music paper, some handwriting. And I did the same on the back, except I kept it a bit plainer, so that's more of my earth paints. And I did a Coptic binding to hold it all together, which is my favourite one to do. I also added some stitching around the sides, and inside is cardboard, a layer of cardboard. I use it to weigh down my papers when I eco-print them, and when they're wet the layers peel apart. And that was the actual rack that was underneath the stack when they were cooking in the pan, and it's made a resist print onto the cardboard, so I've kept that. And on the back I've done a similar thing with another layer of the cardboard. And inside I've got irregular pages, so a bit of an introduction there as to why I did it. And then I just did collaging, sketching, writing from my journal, which you have already seen if you've been following these videos, and inspired by photographs that I took. And where we used to live, there were some cracked concrete walls holding the garden beds, and I just drew with a pen the cracks and holes in it and some of the grit that was embedded in the concrete. I also took photographs of it to print onto photocopy paper, and this is a coloured hand-drawn version of some of the patterns of the pebbles. So I just worked intuitively. There was grass growing in the edge of the garden bed which needed to be pulled out, but before I pulled it out I drew some blades of grass there. So you can be quite minimalist about it. You don't have to draw every texture and every item that you see. Just pick out things that you want to feature. This is based on another photograph. It's a view from here actually, looking towards St Patrick's Head, which is a pyramid-shaped mountain which is right in view of our living area. And then I just stylised some of the trees and contoured some of the bushes and some of the land outlines. And a bit like people like Matisse, I just used colours I wanted to use. They don't necessarily look like the realistic colours, but they were inspired by the colours. And I felt that it needed a bit of red because the blues and browns and greens were a bit muted, so I added red, even though the bush that's there is not red. This is a Banksia leaf. We have a lot of Banksias growing here. They're endemic to this area. And I just enjoyed putting this together. This was based on another photograph when we were on a drive one day, and my back was bad, so I had to get out and walk for a bit, and it was just a beautiful area, so I took a photograph. And then I superimposed a bird on it. And in the writing, the bird is actually a partalote, but a partalote isn't those colours. I just used artistic license. We had some proteas that dried, so they inspired some of this. There's another photo of some of the pebbles in the concrete. The concrete was breaking down because it's quite old. And then I did a bit of a drawing of the pebbles to continue the photograph. And I've just kept it in black and white so I could see the tones rather than the colours. More to do with the protea. I use watercolour pencils mostly in this book and a black art pen. And I loved superimposing washes of the watercolour pencils, which I just scribbled on there and then wet with a wet paintbrush and then drew over the top. So the pages are different sizes as well because I wanted that variety and I wanted to be able to see little bits of the next page. So it's mostly about what was growing around my home, the home we were building and also the home we were living in. And now, of course, we are living in the house that we built. So again, quite stylised, nothing too detailed, just catching glimpses of different things. This was an eco print given to me by a friend, so I used that to inspire the leaf drawings. This is a vase that I have that's all brown, but it has beautiful carved leaf shapes in it. And then I used that to inspire this drawing as well. There's the vase just there. So you can see quite often I would do the collages first, and you'll see here I haven't done much drawing on that page, none at all on that page. So that's ready for me to do it. This is an ongoing process. It's actually several years, 2021, when I started this. So just enjoying. This is looking down onto a pot plant, so that's the rim of the pot plant and the plants that were in it. That was a shadow drawing that I did in a workshop of some really big buds on a plant. So I used that as an inspiration and coloured them in with the watercolour pencils. This was our backyard at the time. So there's a photograph of some of it and there's a drawing. Again, very simple, not too detailed. And I just enjoyed it. There was no pressure. That was another shadow drawing of a plant that I did in a workshop, and I just coloured it and cut it out. And again, those buds that you saw in the previous page. And I like the way you can see part of the other pages because these are not as long. That was a manhole, no, not a manhole cover, it was the cover of a petrol tank in the ground, and another little cover there. I just like the circular shape. And some more drawing and writing. That one needs some more work. This is again the outlook from where we live, and it was a beautiful sunny morning with rays coming down, so I stylised those and just captured some of the essence of it. And then that's the last page. So I really have enjoyed working on this, and I keep leaving it out hoping that I'll continue it, but I haven't yet, so maybe this will give me the incentive. The next thing I'd like to show you is some things I've done as part of the slow stitch journal that we're doing for K3n, Catherine Chambers. And we had a nature theme time before last I should say, and we had to find some things outside that we could press in a book and then use as stitching on different backgrounds, paper or cloth. So this one I've actually put it onto a collage that I did in 2022 and added the bracken fern and stitched that on, and I also added the bit of naturally dyed wool, just a stripper offcut from something else. And this one was some reeds, and I just wanted to do some layers, so I did a circle of cloth with the edges turned under using a paper template and laid that on a piece of eco-printed paper and 2 reeds and a little twig, and then I stitched that onto some naturally dyed wool cloth. You can see a bit of it underneath, and then I stitched that onto a piece of cotton that's also naturally dyed. So they may end up getting used for something, I'm not sure what. I did do another one which ended up in the journal, which I will show you. So this is my number 2 journal for the slow stitching exercise with K3n. The other one has got very fat because it has 26 weeks of exercises in it. So I'll just open it. So I've written something in the front which I've shared on my social media page, and then a title page, and then this is the actual journal layout for the nature exercise that I was just talking about. And I had a little card that was given to me by an online friend who does beautiful writing, actually. It's beautiful calligraphy style writing, and she eco-printed this. So I added a little piece of my eco-printed paper and a stitched leaf, and we were encouraged to make a little hole in the leaf and put a bit of fabric behind and stitch that. So I've used a bit of naturally dyed silk for that. And the journal excerpts reads, let's see if I can read upside down. The warm notes of a cello on the radio. So the rest is all ready to go. We've done another one since this one, and this is based on azuki, which is a Japanese cleaning cloth, and it's made out of very worn out pieces of cloth layered together and stitched. And this wasn't worn cloth, but it was leftovers from other projects. So I used 3 layers of naturally dyed fabric, linen on the top, and then cotton underneath and inside. So it's the 3 layers. And the piece that I've written here is something that still speaks to my heart when I read it, actually. It was a rainy, damp, foggy morning. So this is what I wrote. There is a damp silence. The birds have nothing to say. I love the way the books wrap too, and they get fatter and fatter as you work on them. Here I have something that is following on from my scroll. I made a scroll which I shared a little bit about in my last video, and it had lots of circles on it, and I really enjoyed doing the circles, so I wanted to do some more. So I've actually done 12, which are still in progress, and I'm really enjoying doing these. And I better turn that the right way up. The feather stitch that I learned on K3n's channel is there because I really love doing it. And then there's a fly stitch. And then here I've got coral stitch, which I knew nothing about, and I saw it on Jeri Bellini's channel. Now she is doing a dot a day project, and I've only just discovered her, so I didn't know anything about the dot a day project when I started my scroll. I just love doing the circles, and I've done them on a lot of my work, which I've shared recently on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like to have a look, there's some current and previous works that feature circles. So Jeri is just really encouraging me to do more circles, and I probably don't need much encouragement actually to do that. So I'm just experimenting with different stitches using naturally dyed fabrics. The background is wool wadding that was left over from a quilt from years ago when I used to make traditional style quilts, and it takes dye quite well, and I think I used Banksia leaves to get this lovely warm brown. And then I've used silk, including vintage kimono silk, and cotton. This one actually has little spots on it, and I quite like that. And these have all been naturally dyed. That's a piece of silk. This reminds me of a river. I was just playing really with shapes. And that's another cotton one. And this one hasn't been embellished yet, but it is sewn onto the background. That was a piece of silk that was sent to me by an online friend called Michelle when I was recovering from cancer and having radiation. And I still have a few pieces of the fabrics that she sent me left, and I really treasure them. This is vintage kimono silk, and I had printed katainas on it. I'll just hold it up, I don't know if you can see it, and it's very faint. It only did an outline. You can just see it inside the stitching there. So I just echoed the stitching around it and did a vein line down the middle because I didn't want to cover it up. This is another circle. This is cotton. And it's just fun experimenting with stitches. Sometimes I combine two stitches, like this is blanket stitch and detached chain stitch with a little extension. That one is also chain stitch interspersed with fly stitch and back stitch. And sometimes I use more than one colour, which I'll show you in a moment. So that's a piece of avocado seed and skin dyed cotton, which is a pale pink. This is feather stitch again with some fly stitch and French knots over cotton. And then this one is still in progress, and I've used so far 3 different colours of thread on this. And I've done the chain stitch leaves with back stitch, some pistol stitch, and the coral stitch again that I learned from Jeri. So that's a lot of fun to do, and I'm just enjoying doing that in my studio. So last but not least, I will show you my first journal, which is very fat. I've got a bit of a problem with this. It's I used pencil when I did the journal writing, and the pencil ended up smudging as I handled it. And so I wrote over the top in black pen and then rubbed the pencil out. But as you can see, the pencil has left some smudges.